What happens when the greatest empire on earth suddenly loses its leader? Chaos, betrayal, and a war that would rage for half a century. In 323 BCE, Alexander the Great, master of a realm stretching from Greece to India, died at just 32 years old. He left behind no clear heir, only a single, cryptic phrase on his deathbed: "To the strongest." This wasn't a succession plan. It was a death sentence for his empire and the starting gun for one of history's most brutal and fascinating conflicts, the Wars of the Diadochi. These weren't just any power-hungry nobles. These were the Diadochi, the successors, Alexander's own generals, his closest friends, men who had fought by his side through every bloody battle. Now, they would turn their swords on each other. The prize, the entire world as they knew it. Get ready to dive into a story of ambition, betrayal, and epic battles that makes Game of Thrones look like a tea party. We travel back. Babylon, 323 BC. The air is thick with grief and suspicion. Alexander's body is barely cold, and his generals are already circling like vultures. Who are these men? First, there's Perdiccas, the most senior commander, who was handed Alexander's signet ring. He sees himself as the regent, the one to hold the empire together for Alexander's unborn son. Then you have Ptolemy, a shrewd and cautious strategist. While others dreamed of ruling the whole empire, Ptolemy had his eyes on a specific, rich prize, Egypt. He was playing the long game. There was also Antigonus, the one-eyed, and old, grizzled, and incredibly ambitious veteran who controlled much of modern-day Turkey. He didn't just want a piece of the pie. He wanted the whole bakery. Let's not forget the cunning Cassander in Macedonia, the brutal Lysimachus in Thrace, and the ambitious Seleucus, who would eventually forge his own massive empire in the east. These weren't just names in a history book. They were brothers in arms, now turned into bitter rivals. The initial arrangement was fragile at best. Perdiccas was named regent for Alexander's mentally disabled half-brother, Philip III, and Alexander's yet-to-be-born son, Alexander IV. The empire was carved up into satrapies, or provinces, with each general getting a slice to govern. It was a temporary solution meant to maintain unity. But unity was the last thing on anyone's mind. The first crack in this fragile peace came from a very unexpected source, if you will precision. Ptolemy, ever the opportunist, made a bold move. He hijacked Alexander the Great's funeral cortege as it was making its way back to Macedonia and diverted it to Egypt. This was more than just grave robbing. It was a massive propaganda coup. Possessing the body of the deified Alexander gave Ptolemy immense legitimacy. It was a clear signal to the other Diadochi: Egypt is mine, and I have the blessing of our great leader. Perdiccas was furious. This was a direct challenge to his authority as regent. He couldn't let it stand. So, he gathered his army and marched on Egypt to punish Ptolemy. This was the start of the First War of the Successors. But Perdiccas made a fatal miscalculation. He underestimated both Ptolemy's defensive genius and the treacherous waters of the Nile. After a disastrous failed river crossing where thousands of his own men drowned, his frustrated and demoralized officers, including his own commander Seleucus, turned on him. Perdiccas was assassinated in his own tent. The first major player was out of the game, and the wars had just begun. With Perdiccas gone, the remaining generals met again to redivide the empire. But this was just shuffling the deck chairs on a sinking ship. The new regent, an old general named Antipater, died shortly after, leaving a power vacuum that his son, Cassander, was all too eager to fill. Cassander was a ruthless man who harbored a deep hatred for Alexander and his family. He marched on Macedonia, seized control, and in a chilling act of cruelty, had Alexander's mother, Olympias, executed. But his cruelty didn't stop there. He also imprisoned Alexander's young son, Alexander IV, and his wife, Roxana. For years, the boy king was a pawn, a symbol of an empire that no longer existed. Then, when he was just a teenager, Cassander had both him and his mother secretly murdered. With their deaths, the direct line of Alexander the Great was extinguished forever. The pretense of preserving the empire for an heir was over. Now, it was every man for himself. The goal wasn't to be a regent anymore. It was to be a king. Enter Antigonus the One-Eyed. With Perdiccas gone, Antigonus was now the most powerful man in Asia. He and his brilliant son, Demetrius, later known as the Besieger of Cities, went on a rampage, conquering territory and expanding their power base. Antigonus saw himself as the true successor to Alexander, the one man capable of reuniting the entire empire under his rule. In 306 BC, after a stunning naval victory near Cyprus, he took the monumental step of declaring himself and Demetrius kings. It changed everything. Ptolemy, Cassander, Lysimachus, and Seleucus were all united on one thing. Antigonus could never be allowed to step into Alexander's shoes. They responded by declaring themselves kings of their own respective territories. They were all monarchs now. The dream of a united empire was officially dead, replaced by a new world of competing Hellenistic kingdoms. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown. The other four kings formed a grand coalition against the seemingly invincible Antigonus. The climax came in 301 BC at the Battle of Ipsus in central Anatolia. This was one of the largest battles of the ancient world. On one side, the aged but still formidable Antigonus, over 80 years old, and his son Demetrius, commanding an army of around 80,000 men. On the other, the combined forces of Cassander, Lysimachus, and Seleucus. Seleucus brought a secret weapon he had acquired from his campaigns in the east, war elephants. Hundreds of them. The battle was fierce. Demetrius, leading the cavalry, successfully charged and routed the enemy cavalry wing. But in a moment of youthful hubris reminiscent of Alexander himself, he pursued them too far from the battlefield. Seizing the opportunity, Seleucus used his elephants to form a living wall, cutting Demetrius off from his father's infantry. Surrounded and overwhelmed, Antigonus's phalanx was broken. The old general, who had refused to flee, died fighting, struck down by a volley of javelins. The Battle of Ipsus was the decisive moment. Antigonus's dream of a reunited empire died with him on that dusty plain. His vast kingdom was carved up by the victors. Lysimachus took most of Anatolia, Seleucus claimed Syria, and Cassander held onto Macedonia. Ptolemy, who had wisely sat out the battle, solidified his control over Egypt. The world of Alexander was now officially fractured into four major kingdoms. But the story doesn't end there. The Diadochi were a restless bunch. Peace was never going to last. In the years that followed, Lysimachus and Seleucus, the two great victors of Ipsus, eventually turned on each other. Into 81 BC, nearly 45 years after Alexander's death, they met in battle. By now, they were both old men in their 70s. Seleucus emerged victorious, killing Lysimachus and becoming the last of Alexander's original successors still standing. For a brief moment, it seemed he might finally unite at least the Asian and European parts of the empire. But just months later, as he was crossing into Europe to claim his prize, he was assassinated by an ambitious son of Ptolemy. The last of the original companions was gone. So, who really won Alexander's empire? The answer is no one. And everyone. No single general managed to hold it all together. The dream of a single world empire died with Alexander. But in its place, his successors, through their relentless ambition and constant warfare, forged a new world. The Ptolemaic kingdom near Egypt, the Seleucid Empire in the east, the Antigonid dynasty in Macedonia. These Hellenistic kingdoms would dominate the Mediterranean and the Near East for centuries. They spread Greek language, culture, and ideas across the known world, creating a vibrant, interconnected civilization that would later be inherited by Rome. The city of Alexandria, Egypt, founded by Ptolemy, became the intellectual and cultural capital of the world, home to the Great Library. The legacy of the Diadochi is a paradox. They were brutal, backstabbing warlords who tore apart the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Yet, in doing so, they laid the foundations for a new Hellenistic age that would shape the course of Western civilization. It was a bloody, chaotic, and ultimately creative process. The ultimate betrayal gave birth to a new world. Subscribe to Elemental History and check out our entire library right now. You'll never miss out.